Hello, everyone, again. This is Eric, aka Justice Blinded. Eric, aka Mute the stream here. We are live with another Keyforge stream. We are doing the adaptive finals, the finals of the Archon Adaptive Tournament, the Decks of Keyforge Archon Adaptive Tournament. The two competitors will be Noam and LSY. We're going to jump into the match in just a minute, but a few things real quickly. I'll explain adaptive in a moment for those people who don't understand what adaptive is, but I will just be first talking briefly about the decks that each player will be bringing. LSY will be bringing this deck, Shin Fighter of the Lady General's Crad. Shin Fighter does not have an exceptional amount of amber control. You can see it only has a handful of amber control pieces, but it has an extremely nasty Restringuntus combo. So Restringuntus is the creature that allows you to basically lock your opponent out of a particular house, and Shin Fighter has 2 Arises, which allow him to get back the Restringuntus, along with a couple Ember Imps, which is very disruptive, and he's got a Gateway as well. So look for one of the possible scenarios being Gateway, Arise, and then Restringuntus. Along with all the other nastiness. He's also got some fighty things in Brobnar, as Brobnar is known to do. He has two reverse times in the deck, which is very good in combination with Arise. If you reverse time early on in the match, put the whole deck into discard, basically, and then manage to have an Arise, you can Arise for all the cards in discard. So it has a lot of synergistic effects, and it tries to win usually by Restringuntus Lockout. The deck is probably not fast enough to win through other means, other than Restringuntus Lockout in most matchups, but sometimes it does. Usually it's a Restringuntus Lockout deck. Noam will be bringing Shamu, the Villain Warlord. That is this deck. And so Shamu, I'm just going to say Shamu because I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that's what we're going with. So Shamu is a little bit of a faster deck. It's got a 19 expected amber. It's got 21 creatures, so it's going to have a lot of board presence. It's got some levels of disruption for creatures. It's got Ammonia Clouds. In terms of dealing with Restringuntus, it's got Ammonia Clouds. It's got 2 Nerve Blasts. It's got a Lights Out, which can pop Restringuntus. It's got Lost in the Woods, which could stick it back at Library. A Mimicry for a Gateway or something else in LSY's deck. And it's got a fair amount of Amber generation. It's got a very large... Shamu has a very large Mars quotient here with 2 Squawkers, a bunch of creatures, including a Dominator, a Mind Warper, and a Key Abduction, potentially to finish things off. So it should be an interesting matchup here. For those of you who do not know, Adaptive is both players choose the deck they want to bring. They play that deck round 1. They swap round 2. So they play each other's deck round 2. If the score is tied, meaning the same deck has won twice, they will bid chains on the deck to see who plays it in round 3. So we'll see if that happens in this matchup. I am joining the match right now, and we're in. Okay, just wishing good luck to the competitors, and we will see how this plays out. Hopefully they remembered to show hands to spectators. I'm assuming they will. So we'll see those come up in a moment. And they did, and we're off and running. So LSY has drawn first player here. LSY chose to... Oh, wow. LSY chose to mulligan, and he mulliganed into pretty much the ideal potential hand for his deck because he's got reverse time. So turn 1, look for a reverse time, followed by... well, actually... Whoa, this is interesting. So if he turn 1 reverse times... I don't know that will. I don't think that'll work because then he'll have to draw and it'll cycle his discard pile. So I don't. If he had 7 cards, that would work because he wouldn't draw another card, but now he can't. Oh, that's interesting. So we'll see what happens. You might see him do something like dump a Brobnar artifact on the table turn 1. Meanwhile, Noam is keeping a hand with a Dust Pixie, Cooperative Hunting, Nocturnal Maneuver, a Master Plan Nexus, and a Mind Warper. So we will see, probably going to be seeing some Untamed here, but we will see exactly what happens. So I think right now LSY is doing math and confirming, probably, although he's played this deck, he probably knows this, that if he plays Reverse Time, it'll flop the draw pile into the discard, which is what he wants with his Arises in hand and the massive disc creature Restringuntus lockout situation going on in his discard pile at that time. The problem is that if he plays the Reverse Time now, he would have to draw a card up to 6 at the end of turn. That would flop the discard pile back over, and it would into the deck, and it would be of no use. So LSY literally just calls Brobnar, and he discards a War Chest. Now that might be that looks very smart, open-handed here, but it's also smart even if you don't know what your opponent's hand is, because he figures he's not likely to be winning with the War Chest. He doesn't want to give him a target for Nexus. What did he master plan there? He did that very quickly. I didn't see. I think he master planned Cooperative Hunting. So I think that's under master plan. He played a Nexus. Now we're going to see LSY probably call Logos. He did. He's going to decide whether or not he wants Fogify to be. Actually, he can't. Yeah, he has to play Fogify because when he does this, there has to be at least 2 cards in his draw pile. Otherwise, the same problem would occur that we discussed the first turn. So he cycled that back. Next turn, you're going to see LSY call Arise and pick up all of the disc creatures in his graveyard. And it's going to be nasty. So we'll see what Noam does here. It looks like it's probably going to be some Untamed things. That's my guess. Let's see. Yep, sure enough. Dropping down Pixie, Mushroom Man, Lupo the Scarred, and playing Nocturnal Maneuver for no effect. I mean, for the effect of gaining an Amber, but not actually tapping anything. There we go. Okay. So, Noam is LSY is doing the predicted Arise here. He's going to rest Ringuntus, probably, although I don't know what you rest Ringuntus for here. You probably rest Ringuntus for Untamed, although you could also do it for Shadows. He might also hold rest Ringuntus until he has a more favorable board position. This is kind of a personal preference because he's not, let's see, he'll have... No, he can play the rest Ringuntus and hold the Arise. I think that's probably what he'll do. He'll play all the creatures out, so all these nasty creatures, and then he's going to play another Ember Imp and rest Ringuntus probably and hold the last Arise. That would be my guess. And then call... I don't know what he calls. It's either Untamed or Shadows. Or is he going to hold the rest Ringuntus? So the arguments in favor of playing the rest Ringuntus here are that you get to actually draw a card, that you do put some disruption into the play currently, and that you have an Arise in hand to pull it back. Actually, you're not going to draw a card if you play rest Ringuntus, I forgot, because he has 1 chain from the Arise. So he's not going to draw a card anyway. So the question is, do you want the rest Ringuntus on the field? If he plays the rest Ringuntus and calls Untamed, he knows that they can, that Noam can target it fight into it with any of the creatures. If he calls Shadows, he can fight into it with a Nexus and it wouldn't even die. So it's kind of a hard call here. He ends up calling Untamed. He's basically forcing Noam, from his perspective, he doesn't know that he has all those Shadows cards in hand. He's forcing Noam to use Nexus to fight. Although Noam also has cooperative hunting, which is pretty good. I would expect to see Lights Out here being played by Noam, bouncing the Ember Imps, and then fighting the Restoring Guntus. That would be my guess. So he does use the cooperative hunting. Sue doesn't need to, so we just reap with Nexus. So we did the same thing. He did cooperative hunting and didn't need to use Lights Out. And now because he got rid of the 2 Ember Imps with cooperative hunting, so that turned out to be a very good stash and master plan. He then gets to basically dump his hand on the table. And now LSY has a decision. He can go back to arising all of the creatures. The problem with that play, I mean, that's likely going to be the play, because if he doesn't do that play, then his discard's going to cycle into his draw pile. And if his discard cycles into his draw pile, then he won't be able to arise effectively. So he almost has to do that, and that's what he's doing. The problem with this situation is that you can't effectively block very much on a Restoring Guntus play. You could stall maybe a little, but not a lot, especially since Noam played Mac the Knife, right? So Mac the Knife can be used as if it belongs to any house, any active house, and Mac the Knife can kill Restoring Guntus just straight up, unless Restoring Guntus has some sort of increased damage or armor, that sort of thing, which we know it doesn't currently, and it can't. So he used Shooter to put some damage on Lupo the Scarred, which is good. And then he's just going to drop down a bunch more creatures. I would expect that he will drop down all the creatures and then probably call Shadows? I don't know. No, I think you got to go back to calling Untamed because he dumped all those Shadows cards last turn. I think you got to go back to calling Untamed here because you have to know he's obviously Untamed is better looking at his hand, but you have to know that he's more likely to have Untamed things in hand than he is Shadows because he just dumped all those Shadows cards out. It's 2-2, but he just called Shadows, so the odds that he would have redrawn a bunch of Shadows cards is low. Lower than Untamed, anyway. Lower than the possibility of him already having Untamed cards in his hand from the previous draw. So we'll see what he does here. He also has Ember Imps, so if he calls Shadows, Noam would have to remove 2 Ember Imps. He would want to remove 2 Ember Imps at a Restoring Guntus to play all his creatures. Now, we know that Noam has Mimicry here, and Mimicry is a very good antidote to LSY's deck, because if LSY is operating in the universe where he wants his entire deck in discard because he wants to be able to arise the disc stuff, his disc creatures, that is also going to give Noam access to basically LSY's entire deck other than his hand for the purpose of Mimicry. Now, in this particular situation, reasonable Mimicry targets could include something like a Bouncing Death Quark, so he could selectively pick off the creatures he wanted. Yes, and so and perhaps knowing that, he called Restoring Guntus for Untamed, and cycled his discard back into the draw pile. So now the Mimicry is not useful currently. It'll be very useful as soon as he has a discard. So he's just going to dump some Mars creatures on the board. Kill Restoring Guntus with Mac, as we forecast earlier. And he'll probably play Key Abduction for the Amber. He discarded it. I don't understand that at all, because Mac the Knife isn't considered a Mars creature. Key Abduction gets him 1 Amber. He already used Mind Warper, so he could have just played the Key Abduction, pulled the Mind Warper back to hand, and then replayed it. The Key Abduction wouldn't hit for a key, wouldn't get a key, but he'd get the Amber stapled on the Key Abduction. Okay. The reason that doesn't work, this is the reason why. The reason it didn't work is because I forgot that he played Squawker, and that's how he got Mind Warper ready. So he's played 2 cards, and there are 2 Ember Imps on the table, so he could not play Key Abduction. He can either hold it or discard it. So discarding it is correct there. That's the reason he discarded it, rather than play it. So the Ember Imps are definitely doing work, and LSY has to decide if there's any way he can protect the Ember Imps, and if not, what does he want to do? Unfortunately, he really wants the rest of this hand to be Logos, right? Because he'd love to play Fogify to protect the Ember Imps, but he can't just call Logos and play one card. That would be a very bad turn. So now he's deciding between getting value out of his disboard and drawing only one card versus dumping a bunch of Brobnar cards on the board and getting no value off the board, but drawing 5 new cards. So it's probably a close decision. I would be tempted here just to run up the score with these disc creatures. Noam is playing Shamu. In terms of hard Amber control, there's a Mind Warper, Nerve Blast. If he's looked at the deck in advance, he knows that there's a Dodger, Umbra. So there's no punishing Amber control. And by punishing Amber control, I mean Noam does not have any cards in his deck like Too Much to Protect, Doorstep, or anything that punishes you for going a certain number above a certain number, right? It has things that will capture and steal and that sort of stuff a little bit, not a lot, but it has nothing that punishes you. So I think if I'm in LSY's seat, I think I would probably prefer to just reap up to 9 and virtually guarantee myself a key there. Playing Brobnar creatures is not bad, because what it will do is it will let you draw more cards, and if you get fortunate, you'll draw into something like an Arise, which is very good, because now he can just repeat the dis nonsense. His dis turn is going to be better the more the quality of his dis turn is directly going to be proportionate to how many dis creatures Noam allows him to have into the next turn. So you have to believe that the Ember Imps are going to go away this turn, one way or another. Noam is deciding now between calling... I don't think calling Mars is... Okay, I was just about to say I don't think calling Mars is an excellent option, but it turns out that is precisely what he's going to do. He's going to Squawker, Megamouth, and then does he have anything that does mass damage? He has Mac, but Mac can't... Oh, I guess Mac could just fight into it. So he's going to Reap to use that to fight into an Ember Imp, and then use Mac to fight into another Imp. That's okay. That's fine. Let's see. I guess you don't want to call Untamed here. You want to preserve your Untamed call because you want the Mimicry to have some value. And the Mimicry currently has no value at all, because the only thing in discard before this turn started was a Restringuntus. So you're just burning a Mimicry, which you don't really want to do. So you're instead going to put yourself in check, which is pretty good, obviously, and then also play some Untamed creatures. Instead, what he did was... Okay, so he didn't do that, though. He just... Okay, that's very weird. He decided to run up the score rather than... He decided to use the Mars House Cheaty stuff as an extra avenue to Reap rather than to kill the Ember Imps. I don't know that I agree with that decision. It does give LSY an interesting choice, if given that his Arise is in discard, and he's only basically now arising for 2 creatures, unless he wants to fight these into the creatures. So he's allowing LSY to have an interesting choice here, because LSY could, in theory, not knowing what the contents of Noam's hand are, LSY could, in theory, try to eliminate one house of creatures from the board to protect his Restringuntus. So use these disc creatures to fight. Presumably, this is an 11 power creature, so that's going to be really hard. But you could try to, say, pick off the Untamed creatures on the board, then play Arise, and then play Charette and something else, and call Shadows. The problem is, if you do that, these Mars creatures can still kill the Restringuntus. So you'd have to kill, you'd ideally have to kill off 2 houses. That would be rather difficult, but let's see what he tries. He could just also abandon that entirely and just race and just try to reap here. Let's see what he does. I think he's probably going to fight. Let's see. So Schuler has been exhausted, but we don't know. He's clearly fighting because, yeah, if he were reaping, that would have told us he was reaping immediately. So he fought Lupo the Scarred. He's picking off the untamed creatures, it looks like. He's going to want to kill Megamouth, because if he doesn't kill Megamouth, then, yeah, okay. The problem with this play is that you can't really do everything you want to do. If he had a way to kill off like Mac and Mushroom Man in addition to the people that he's killed off already, you would have basically just a Dux Pixie, which, yeah, I guess could take out the Restringuntus, but then you wouldn't really have much of the rest of a turn. As it is, what's going to happen is he's going to do some amount of damage. He's going to play Restringuntus, almost certainly call Shadows, and then, but then Noam can just call Untamed, wreck the board again, or, I guess call Mars and just play the 2 creatures and kill Restringuntus with Mac the Knife. This is the benefit. So what Noam is doing here is a good illustration of how you should try to play against a deck that has Restringuntus in it in general, but also one that has Restringuntus, certainly one that has Restringuntus as a primary win condition. You want to diversify your board. And what I mean by that is you want to have creatures on the board of multiple different houses, so it's not really possible for your opponent just to Restringuntus and lock out one particular house on the board and do a lot more disruptive damage that way. He did, LSY did call Shadows. Noam is going to play Untamed as we expected. He's going to play, he is going to play Mimicry for the Arise to get value out of Mimicry for the Untamed creatures. He got a Dust Pixie, a Mushroom Man back. He killed the Restringuntus and both of the Ember Imps, so he got an enormous amount of value, put himself in check, and used Nocturnal Maneuvers to tap down 3 creatures. So what we're most likely looking at, he's going to call Logos just to empty out his hand. He's not going to be able to stop Noam from forging. There's an argument here, if he had any disc creatures at all, or any discards in hand, for calling disc and making Noam pay 9 for a key. Lash of Broken Dreams is useful for stalling, but it's most useful, in my opinion, and I think the opinion of most other top players, it's most useful when you're making your opponent pay 9 for a key, versus just stopping them from forging a key for a turn. The latter is useful. The former, though, of making them pay 9 is a very... It's basically just like lighting 9 of their Ember on fire, which is usually going to be in the long term much better than just stalling a turn, especially when you don't have a lot of hard Ember control in your deck. But he calls Logos and empties out his hand using Knowledge's power to archive the last card in hand. So he does some good things there, and he does put himself in check. It's only at 7, but it still puts himself in check. Looking at the other problem with not calling, actually we have the same problem anyway, but one of the major issues with the board state as it is that that Noam has Nexus in play, and Nexus against LSY's deck is quite good because it can use Lash. So if Noam calls Shadows here, reaps, uses Lash, not only does it prevent LSY from forging, but LSY can't use Lash the next turn. Instead, Noam wanted to call Dis, play some Mars creatures. I'm not sure, because that puts him exactly at 8. If I am if I was Noam, I think I probably would have called Shadows there just to take the Lash out of play. But now we're going to see some Brobnar action from LSY. The Mars play on Noam's part was not bad by any means, but there's an argument to be made for calling Shadows there just to further stall LSY and prevent him from lashing you back. It's not what he's going to do anyway, because what he's going to do is he's going to call Brobnar, play a Banner of Battle, pumping his creatures, play Crump. He'll probably use Anger on Crump to make him lose one. He'll play a Headhunter. He can Anger and Gauntlet, so he could... This is interesting. He probably wants to find a way to kill Nexus, although I don't know if he wants to do so at the expense of... It depends if you want to burn or not burn, right? So, burn the opponent's Amber. I think probably what the best play here, again, given that Noam doesn't have a lot of... Neither deck has a lot of hard Amber control. LSY might just want to get max value in terms of Amber here, so you could play Anger on Headhunter into Nexus, which won't do anything in terms of damage, but will get a fight trigger, so you'll gain one and one from the Nexus, and then Gauntlet Headhunter back into Nexus, killing Nexus, and gaining... and gaining 2 Amber, but why? I missed something here. Why is he fighting? So you use Gauntlet with Crump to make his opponent lose an Amber. I must have missed something. I thought he just played Valdir. I don't know why he was allowed to use Valdir again. But anyway, he used Gauntlet to fight with Crump. He then is playing Anger to use Headhunter to kill Megamouth, and he's going to use the War Chest to gain a bunch of Amber, put himself in check. So that was a fine Brobnar turn. I don't know what happened with Valdir. I don't know how... Oh, there are 2 Valdirs. That's why. So that Valdir was already ready. I missed that. I apologize. So he used, Destruction to Mass Effect. That's a good example of, even in Coda, the first set, Call of the Archons, of a good Brobnar deck turn where you can use War Chest to do a lot of damage. Meanwhile, Noam is called Shadows. He's reaping with Nexus to use Lash, which is, again, part of the reason why I thought we should take out Nexus, we being Team LSY, if you will, that I thought LSY should be taking out Nexus, because the use Nexus, reap, use Lash is just too big of a threat here, especially since now LSY can't use Lash back, except that he doesn't really want to use Lash back right now. It doesn't really matter. So the question now is, what's the play? If he reverse times, he will lose the Restring Guntus. Lose it, meaning he'll go back into deck. It won't be accessible to the other Arise that's sitting in these 9 cards. So he can go back to Brobnar, do some more board damage, clear out some things, perhaps gain more Amber, make him lose some Amber. Or, so Brobnar's an option here. Downside, he doesn't get to lose any cards from hand. He doesn't get to discard cards or filter any cards out of hand. And if Noam comes back and removes a lot of stuff, then that could be a problem. But that is the route he's choosing. His other options were to play Logos and try to, he would be able to empty out his hand down to 1 card with the lab work. But he's chosen to play Brobnar here. And I think what he wants to do is, given that Noam is now at 2 keys, I think minimizing the Amber is a premium. So I think probably what I would do is, the difficulty here is that you can't, it's a Banner of Battle for 1. So in theory, you could kill Phantom using Crump, but I don't know if that's enough value. I think you want to use... You have to get rid of Nexus. Like, you must do that. So he's going to have Headhunter fight into Naughty to gain an Amber. He could Gauntlet Headhunter and have Headhunter fight into Nexus to gain another Amber, and then use some of these creatures to wipe out. Yeah, so he'll kill Naughty there. So he could Gauntlet Headhunter to gain another Amber by fighting into Nexus, because Nexus is elusive. Instead, he makes Crump fight Nexus. I don't know if that's prioritizing saving Crump too much, because Crump really doesn't do a lot for you. He did kill Nexus in that way. He could Gauntlet Headhunter and fight Headhunter into Phantom, gaining another Amber. We know from looking at Noam's hand that that would actually be an optimal play, because Noam can steal one Amber but not two, but instead he's just going to go for the kill and take out Bolter. Right, War Chest, so it doesn't matter. So if you have the War Chest, it wouldn't matter there if you used Headhunter anyway. So that's probably the best play, because that will allow him to clear the board, and he's running on such a thin margin of error with Noam sitting at 3 Amber and 2 keys that he really needs to protect himself here as best he can, knowing that he does not have a substantial amount of Amber control outside of Lash. So we did get rid of Nexus, which was very important. Meanwhile, Noam is just going to steal one, play Dodger, probably Reap with Phantom. I don't think you really want to attack any of the Brobnar creatures here. Okay, so Noam is now a 5 Amber, not lethal yet. I think if you're sitting in LSY seed, LSY forges his second key. I think LSY he's going to want to go to Dis and use Lash to keep Noam off a key next turn. So knowing that, he should probably take this opportunity to either call Brobnar and get more reaping value potentially after you've cleared the board, or play Logos. I think I probably would have played Logos there, playing a Mechanic and then Dexter, so that Mechanic isn't effective and you haven't handed him a key, obviously. I guess if you played both, it doesn't matter what order, but he's going to play Brobnar and fight through here. I don't think I agree with this play. The primary reason I don't agree with this play is because there's a Charette in discard pile, and he's got 1 Arise in 9 cards. So if he played Logos, dumped down to 1 card in hand, he's drawing 5 cards out of his library into... as it turns out, that's going to be a winning play, but if... Yeah. As it turns out, that's a winning play by LSY. I don't think it's the percentage play, though, unless he was tracking the entire deck. And the reason why is because you would have 5 shots at drawing an Arise out of the 11, or it was 9 cards at the time in the discard, in the draw pile. So you would have 5 shots at drawing an Arise. If you draw an Arise, you can Arise the Charette, take him off the Amber, use Lash, play the Amber Imps, play the Restring Contest. You have a lot more play there, especially if you don't play the reverse time. I don't know that I agree with that play, but these are the players in the finals. They know their deck's the best, and that play clearly worked out for him. He was fortunate that he had no Amber control in hand. Although if he was tracking his deck, he would have known that there was no more Amber control for him to draw. So if that's what he was doing, then more power to him. Because as it turns out, that's exactly what he needed to do. Either way, a very good game. So we're going to move on to game 2. Both players will now switch decks. I will get the Crucible to work correctly. Both players will now switch decks. So LSY will be playing Shamu, and Noam will be playing Shin Fighter. It was a very close matchup. There's a lot of draw dependency in these decks, given that there's not a large amount of Amber control. So you're really trying to make sure you hit the Amber Control on time and with the correct pieces. And here we see Noam get a very similar hand to what LSY mulliganed into last game. He's got both reverse time and an Arise, so Noam will almost certainly keep this hand because it will allow him to... No, he won't. Okay, that is extremely interesting. So I'm going to write that down because if we get a chance to talk to Noam later, I'm going to ask him about that. But he had reverse time, Arise, and a couple other Logos cards. So we'll ask him about not keeping that hand. I'll have to bump the stream back just to see maybe perhaps what the stream was. But meanwhile, in the actual game, LSY starts out with a Nexus. Noam uses the opportunity to play a bunch of Logos cards, Twin Bolt Dexter, Titan Mechanic, Fogify. He did not discard Dexter, so a lot of players there, and there's a debate, but a lot of players will discard Dexter, especially if you're not capturing an Amber there, because they don't really want to just keep cycling Dexter back to hand. But he plays Dexter, so we'll see how that works out. And LSY will then play... he'll play Nerve Blast, Nexus, Lights Out, and then he's going to protect the Nexus with Shadow Self. So we bounced both Dexter and Titan Mechanic to hand. So Noam has a choice here. Noam can either call Logos and play reverse time, call Logos and discard reverse time, or do the third option, door number 3, which is call Brobnar, and play Brobnar creatures, hoping that he will draw more things. So the interesting thing here is now Noam's going to have the reverse time or not reverse time question next turn. So we'll see what he does. LSY is going to play Untamed. He's playing Full Moon. He'll play a Witch and Lupo. The Witch definitely protected by Shadow Self. We did not see the Witch last game because that was in the last, I think, 3 cards of Noam's libraries at the very bottom. The Witch does a lot of work in most Untamed decks, allowing you to house cheat once per turn as long as he's in play, and she, I guess. And it's going to allow the players to do that. I just realized that my face is covering up the card preview, so apologies to the audience here if you've been looking for that. I'm going to move my face down here, and that way when I look at cards, you could see the cards. I just realized that. I apologize. Anyway, Noam played the anticipated Logos turn. He did elect to play reverse time. He played Knowledge's Power first, so he threw Knowledge's Power in with Fogify and I think one other Logos card, Twin Bolt. There they are, essentially drawing them back and putting himself up to 2 Amber in the process. So LSY sitting on 4 Amber. He has a protected Nexus and Witch. He can use the Nexus to Gauntlet. Loop was a good Gauntlet target. So he has 2 options probably here. He can call Shadows, play a Master Plan for most likely Key Abduction, because I think he knows that Shamu does not have any hard Amber control. Artifact control. It just has Tentacus. So we can force him to pay one, for the Master Plan, but he cannot destroy the Master Plan or take use of the Master Plan as LSY could currently because he has Nexus. So he'll probably, yes, he does call Shadows. It's a safe, all that means is it's safe to Master Plan. You don't need to worry about Master Plan being destroyed. So he's going to use Gauntlet, to use Lupo like we suggested earlier, to fight into something. I would guess this Valdir, but it could be Dexter. Dexter's not a terrible option here. Oh, we already fought Mother. I'm sorry, that happened so quickly I didn't catch that. Mother is 100% the better option than any of those things I was discussing. He's going to play Master Plan, and he Master Plans... I missed what he Master Planned, but it wasn't Key Abduction. Key Abduction would be what I Master Planned there, but I apologize. That was very quick. Can I go back and see? I don't know. He Master Planned a card. Well, some of the viewers probably saw what he Master Planned, but I'll stay in suspense for a moment, because I thought he was going to... I was expecting Key Abduction. He did not Master Plan that. Noam is playing Logos. It's Fogifying Twin Bolt, Shadow Self to redirect. Okay, Twin Bolt. So he tried to Twin Bolt something else, but ended up just Twin Bolting the Shadow Self. Knowledge is Power, Titan Mechanic. Reaping with the 2 Logos creatures. Putting himself in check at 6. What mimicry options does LSY have here? Yeah, some okay ones. Knowledge of Power, Twin Bolt, Fogify. I don't know that any of them are great options, but they're acceptable options if you want to call Untamed. The other option here is to call Mars. Now, again, if you call Mars, it feels bad to hold Key Abduction. It feels bad to play Key Abduction, which is why I would have Master Planned Key Abduction in this particular instance. Because Key Abduction could be the thing at the end that wins LSY the game, the match, and the championship if he has it available. So, again, I'm saying this all without the knowledge of what he actually Master Planned, because he did that very quickly. So, perhaps he made a better decision than I would have there. But that's my argument for Key Abduction. Instead, he just plays Key Abduction for the Amber, and then he's going to play the Mars creatures, which are definitely a fair amount of threat. Noam would like him to play all these Mars creatures right now, because what's going to happen now is that Noam is almost certainly, next turn, going to Gateway. Well, I guess maybe not almost certainly, because his Arise is pretty bad. I think Noam might take a turn off. Noam might say, I'm gonna... Yeah, that's actually pretty good. So he could Reap, Reverse Time, dump all the disc creatures into Graveyard. We know all the disc creatures are in these 19 cards, with the exception of, I think he might have archived one other earlier. So he plays... I would expect Noam to call Logos, Reverse Time, Cooperative Hunting to kill Dexter. Okay, so he's using... The Witch is already coming into play, because the Witch is allowing him to play Cooperative Hunting off turn, which is very good. He did drop the Mars creatures. I think what Noam wants to do here to get max value is Reap or fight with the mechanic. Probably Reap. Then play Reverse Time. It feels bad, but instead he's going to Gateway right now. Oh, he had Keyhammer. Okay, alright. So that makes it a little bit better. So he's going to play Keyhammer, Lash, Ember Imp, and then he could play a Rise for... Nothing. He did not play a Rise. Okay, so he's holding on to the Rise. His long-term plan is to call Logos next turn, put the disc creatures in discard, play Dexter or discard Dexter, and then play a Rise the following turn for all the disc creatures and try to set up a Restoring Gun to Slock. He made a decision that it was more important right now for him to wipe the board and prevent LSY from getting further ahead. That's why he played a Gateway rather than just taking one turn off to set up the combo that I was discussing. Given that LSY is at 1 key and 3 amber, it's probably a reasonably close decision, but playing the Gateway there is certainly not bad, because it prevents, especially when you have an Ember Imp as follow-up, it prevents LSY from doing anything super dramatic with his board. I would guess we're going to see LSY call Mars here, because he gets max value out his Ammonia Clouds if he plays it right now, because he will kill the Ember Imp and then drop two Mars creatures. And then after that, what he'll do is he will pass back, and now we're probably going to see logos from Noam. Yes. So he'll play Dexter and then play Reverse Time. There's not a lot of utility to discard. There are other scenarios where you might want to discard Dexter. You don't really get a lot of utility there because you just cycle Dexter back into your draw pile, and you're not really getting anything because you're specifically going to be playing Reverse Time next. Meanwhile, Noam has put all of the disc creatures into discard. Never has a more appropriate name joke been made about disc creatures and discard than in this particular deck, because that's where you want them so you can arise them. So next turn, Noam's going to call disc. Oh, he drew the gateway back. Okay, all right. So that's super good. So he can actually gateway and then arise, playing Ember Imp, Tentacus, Charette, Restringantus, Schuler. So Noam's in a reasonably decent position here. LSY has to be anticipating, because it's his deck that Noam is playing, and he knows it well. LSY has to be anticipating an Arise play with this next turn. That being said, he doesn't necessarily know that Noam has Gateway as well. So he does not know that any creatures he's about to play are going to get blown up. But that is precisely what's going to happen. Excuse me. So Noam will play 2 Shadows creatures. He'll Nerve Blast Dexter. And then Noam will do the Arise play with this. Now, the one thing I will say is that we know that LSY has Mimicry in hand. There are 9 cards left in draw. There is potentially an argument for Noam not to play the Gateway here because he's worrying about it being Mimicried. But I think that with 9 cards left in the deck, you don't know for sure that he has Mimicry. So I think you kind of have to play the Gateway anyway and risk it being Gatewayed. Although I will tell you this, for sure, what I would call if I'm Noam, because you haven't seen Mimicry, and the thing you're now most afraid of is a Mimicry Gateway. For sure, I would call Untamed if I were Noam in this position, because, I mean, obviously we see Mimicry in the hand, in LSY's hand, but you know that Mimicry is in the deck, it hasn't been played, and there it is. That's the pro play right there. LSY correctly calling Untamed, preventing Noam from Mimicrying. So that's an excellent play by Noam there. Noam calling Untamed on the Restringantus, preventing LSY from Mimicrying. They switched their decks, so it's all confusing. But that was a great play by Noam there. Great call for Untamed. LSY, again, I forget what he has under Master Plan. Forgive me. If anyone in chat wants to remind me what he has on Master Plan, if they saw that, that would be great. Otherwise, we just don't know. And what he's going to do is he's going to Squawker here to ready Think Drome and fight Restringantus, I would assume. That's what you're going to see here. Yeah. Play Squawker, ready Think Drome, fight into Restringantus. Because he has to be able to call Untamed. Instead, he fights Ember Imp. Oh, wait, hold on. What's under Master Plan? He had another Squawker under Master Plan. That's what he archived. Okay, again, I don't know that I would have chosen to do that. I think I probably would have chosen to Master Plan Key Abduction way back when he did that before. But he knew he had a Squawker there, so he was able to get rid of it. That worked out well. He was able to get rid of an Ember Imp and Restringantus, freeing himself up to call Untamed and play all these cards. Next turn. Meanwhile, Noam's just going to say, that's fine. I'm going to Reap for 3, use Lash, lose a chain because he's at 3 chains because of the multiple Arises in the Gateway, and pass back. So your move, LSY. I'm going to put myself in check and we'll see what you got. So LSY is going to call Untamed here in all likelihood, and let's look at what mimicry targets he has. So he can mimicry Gateway, which is good, but not unbelievably good in this situation. He could mimicry Gongoozle. He could mimicry Reverse Time, which doesn't provide a lot of benefit because he's not targeting specific cards that he'd put back into his draw pile. He's just basically redrawing quicker. He could mimicry Punch. That's probably not good enough. He could mimicry and Arise. Now, mimicry and Arise is interesting here. If you mimicry and Arise, you can get Lupo and Witch back if you call Untamed and play it that turn. You could also get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Mars creatures, 6 Mars creatures back. That's a pretty good Mars turn the next turn. That may be too slow because of where Noam is at. Noam is at 7 right now, and you can't stop him if you mimicry and Arise from forging a key. In fact, you may not be able to stop him at all. Even if you mimicry to Nerve Blast, that only gets him down to 6. He can still forge. So I don't think you can afford to mimicry... Oh, excuse me. I was looking at the wrong discard. So we can mimicry a Gateway or Reverse Time. I don't think that's good. Bouncing Death Quark doesn't do anything because he doesn't have enough things on board to kill his board. As a side note, if LSY had a deck, had a board presence, mimicking Bouncing Death Quark could be quite good here because because he would be able to selectively take things out. But that's not what we're going to see. Instead, I think we might see a mimicry for Rise for the Mars creatures, especially since he can Lost in the Woods the 2 disc creatures he cares the most about. Plays a Witch of the Eye, plays Mimicry. Again, probably for an Arise. Although if he mimicries... No. Well, that's interesting. He chose to hold Mimicry and put himself at 6. That is interesting. I do not know that I agree with that play, but let's see why I could be wrong. He might be holding out for a mimicry of a Gateway. He might want to. He might be going for the double mimicry play. Noam is now at 2 keys. This is the problem. Noam captured one with Dexter, took him off a key, and then played Mother, and then basically just said, "I'm in control of this game currently. LSY, what do you have?" So, in doing so, though, he did leave the door open by not killing the witch. He did leave the door open for LSY to mimicry twice, right? Because he could play mimicry, return mimicry to hand, play mimicry. Mimicrying twice is very powerful. I think what I might consider doing is playing these creatures and then mimicrying Bouncing Death Quark. I guess that only gets creatures, but you could still kill a Pixie and a Mother, Mushroom Man and a Dexter, and then Reap to maybe even just get the Pixie back, play the Pixie for Amber, and then Nocturnal Maneuvers the other ones. Mimicrying a Gongoozle isn't terrible, because you just as a method to force him to discard a card at random. I don't know, Chad. I don't know what would you mimicry here? I think there are a lot of choices. Mimicrying Gateway is no longer good now that you've got this Witch of the Eye situation happening. He might just be reaping to pull the Nocturnal Maneuver back. These are his options from Graveyard, by the way. He's got, in terms of Mars stuff, he can take a Witch. That's not terrible. Cooperative Hunting, Full Moon, Lupo, Lost in the Woods. Yeah, that's pretty good, actually. Because now he plays Lost in the Woods, returning the Pixie and the Mushroom Man. And he wants to shuffle in Mother and Schuler, I would imagine. You can leave Dexter out there. So he's going to shuffle these into deck. Oh, no, he shuffles Dexter in. Okay, that's fine. I don't know that I would leave a 5-power creature on board that can kill your guy. I guess Dexter could also kill your guy, so it doesn't really matter. Now, do you want to make sure I have the right graveyard? Now, He does not have. I was thinking he might have Fogifying Graveyard. Again, he does not play Mimicry. So this is the most consecutive turns I have ever seen someone deliberately hold Mimicry. The reason why I'm reasonably certain that's wrong, and we'll ask LSY about this later, but the reason why I'm reasonably certain that it's wrong, hold on, let me remind myself to ask LSY about Mimicry later if we get a chance to talk to him. The reason I'm reasonably certain it's wrong is because there's not a lot of Amber Control in discard, right? If there was a big Amber Control card in discard, like Too Much to Protect or something like that, I think it's totally different. I think holding Mimicry in that situation becomes wise. However, there isn't. So what we're seeing here is we're seeing LSY chain himself with a Mimicry, which is a powerful card, no doubt. But it's not one that, in this particular situation, is overwhelmingly good. Especially since he could play it and use Witch of the Eye again. So LSY is at 8. I think the play for LSY here is probably to go back to Untamed. Yep. Play the Pixie, play the Mushroom Man. I mean, he might just want to reap for one of the Nocturnal Maneuvers. And just keep tapping all this stuff down. And say, okay, you want to keep using Lash, then you have to call Dis and not be able to do anything other than Lash. I think that's actually maybe now his best play. Is he going to hold the Mimicry again? So he's returning Lost in the Woods. Now, his draw pile is only 3 cards big, so that's not terrible. He's going to pop these 2 back to hand. But again, the problem with doing that, rather than Nocturnal Maneuvers, is that you are leaving cards on the board that Noam can use to kill your Witch. Now, yes, in this particular situation, we know that Noam's entire hand is not Dis, so literally what Noam would be doing is call Dis, kill Witch, use Lash, LSY still forges a key, and he's at 15, so we'll have 6 left over anyway. So that makes it not a terrible idea to force LSY's, to force Noam's hand, excuse me. This is Noam's discard. And he's deciding on whether or not to play Mimicry. He now can't Mimicry Bouncing Death Quark because it would kill the Witch. He doesn't want to do that. Reverse Time doesn't really do anything. He could Mimicry in a Rise, but he chose not to do that. Instead, he just passes. So this is now either 4 or 5 turns that he's held the Mimicry in hand. And I don't know that I agree with that play, although there might be some master plan here. Not actual master plan, but a metaphorical master plan. So that's what Noam does. Noam says, I've had enough of your Witch of the Eye nonsense. I'm going to kill it. I'm going to use Lash. You're going to force you to play. But now the problem is because Noam waited to do that. Well, I guess he didn't have an option earlier because it was Nocturnal. No, he did. He could have Gauntleted, right? Earlier on, before that several turn play by LSY, Noam could have used Gauntlet to use a creature to fight Witch. So several turns ago, that might have been the correct play. But now, all LSY has to do is just continually put Noam in check, and he will probably win this matchup. Because there's not a great deal that Noam can do other than call Dis, Reap, and call Lash. But now what LSY needs to do is call Untamed, play Grasping Vines to pop them both to hand, and I have to look, that might be game. I think that is actual game. So he's now, Noam is conceding, that is the game, and because he doesn't have any other ability to do anything. So now he's finally going to play the Mimicry for the lulz. And it doesn't matter. Just don't do anything that causes you to lose Amber. So copy Arise, play the 3 creatures, play the Witch. Yeah. So maybe that was it. I bet you, I'm going to predict if we get a chance to talk to LSY, that was his answer. His answer is, I was holding the Mimicry to Mimicry the Arise so I can get my Witch back. And if that was his answer, it's not, the thought process isn't a bad one. I don't know that it's worth holding the Mimicry for that long. But that's it. The game is over. LSY is your champion. They're talking in chat right now, and it was definitely 2 very close games. Very well fought by 2 excellent players. There are some decisions that watching, I'm not sure were correct, but when I say that, I'm not saying that sarcastically. I'm literally not sure if they were correct. Like, I think in hindsight, a couple decisions could have been different, but there were no massive mistakes by either player that I saw. There were a lot of strategic decisions, which you could make an argument for one way or another, but that's the beauty of adaptive. And when you have 2 decks that are as closely matched as these 2, and that don't have as many Amber Control swingy cards as these 2 do, these 2 do not have Amber Control swingy cards, so you don't have as many swingy types of cards. I just noticed in chat, Nathan, who is apparently watching this in chat, Nathan mentioned to me that Nathan agrees that holding Mimicry was a bad idea, and he thought maybe you should Mimicry for Gongoozle. I think I probably agree with that in terms of targets. But yeah, I mean, it was a very close game. Either way, the holding Mimicry ended up not hurting LSY. We'll see if that's the reason he was doing it. So, LSY and Noam, we'll see if they're able to talk. Just a minute, let me try to reach out to them. So we're going to see if either one of them is able to discuss on stream. Yeah. Nathan also mentioning to me that he thinks that potentially using an Arise I'm asking, LSY has to run to dinner, so he can't talk on stream, but I am just asking him the question about holding the Mimicry there, what the thought process was for holding the Mimicry, and if it was, as I suspected, to use for the Arise. But we'll see what LSY thinks. LSY says he couldn't find a good use for it. That's probably true. I don't know that there were excellent uses for it. There were probably non-ideal uses for lots of different non-ideal uses for the Arise, for sure. Just a second. Yeah, so for the benefit of the people watching on stream, LSY is saying that the main reason that he held on to the Mimicry there is twofold. One, there wasn't a very good use for it at the time, which is true. There wasn't an amazing use for the Arise. And 2, he was winning, so he thought it was a good idea to just hold the Arise just on the off chance that I assume that he could use it. It's insurance, right? Insurance in case he's able to pull out a strong board, so he could always use the Rise for Gateway or what have you. That's fair. So, I mean, that's a fair point. I mean, I think some people would disagree with that approach, but that's one of those strategy questions that can be debated by different people while they're playing the game. I don't think that it's not a horrendous play. I don't think I would not do it. But again, I understand the rationale if you're trying to protect against it. LSY is also saying that he could have witched Full Moon and Mimicry to rise for Amber Burst, so he could have pulled Full Moon out of his own graveyard, played Full Moon, a Rose for, I think, 2 or 3 untamed creatures. How many does he have in discard here? It would just be the 2. So he could, and then play 2 different creatures, except that wouldn't, I don't think that would have worked because these creatures were not in the graveyard. I believe they were, I think they were in the deck at the time, earlier on, like 3 or 4 turns ago, when he had that option. Anyway. Just a second. Okay, so what we saw here was a very good high-level matchup that ended up only going 2 of 3 games. Oh, here, Noam is on chat. Oh, hi, Noam. So Noam is saying Mimicry is a backup card. It either pulls you ahead or catches you up. It's essential for the deck. Right. I agree. I think it's important. I don't know that I would hold it just because there aren't a lot of scenarios where holding it will be beneficial, and if you're already winning, I think that it's a situation where you didn't necessarily need it, but where you didn't. Sorry, I'm doing chats on 2 different fields here. It's not a situation where you needed to use Mimicry and was kind of a win more situation, and you probably wanted to draw more cards because if you were in a desperate situation, you'd want Amber Control. There wasn't Amber Control other than I think maybe 1 Nerve Blast in graveyard. I'm looking. I don't even know. No, I don't even know that there wasn't a Nerve Blast. Never mind. He's not even. I got the decks mixed up. That's not even the graveyard that Nerve Blast would be in. It would be in the deck LSY was playing. So there's not any Amber Control in here in the graveyard. So you're not gonna play any Amber Control. So you're not gonna play. You're not gonna. You might want to just be holding it for Amber Control. Noam is saying in chat that he doesn't know when he drew it, but if he's winning, he won't use it to win more. Noam, if you watch it back, he held Mimicry in hand for about, it was either 4 or 5 turns. Like, he had Mimicry in hand all the times he called Untamed, for like 3 or 4 rotations back. The one thing I would ask, Noam, if you are still on in chat, the one thing I wanted to ask you was, there was a time, I think, somewhere between 2 to 4 turns before the end scenario there, where you had a gauntlet on board, and you had, he kept tapping your creatures down with Nocturnal Maneuvers, and you, I think, just had this War Chest and Valdir in hand. You didn't have a lot of Brobnar creatures in hand or anything. Was there any, and this was before you were forced into basically calling Dis Slashing in order to prevent him from winning, was there any consideration given to calling Brobnar, like dropping a War Chest down, dropping Valdir down, and gauntleting one of the tapped creatures, exhausted creatures, into Witch to try to kill it? Or were you anticipating that he might have had the Mimicry in hand, and maybe could have Mimicry'd in a Rise, or like, I don't know if any of that factored in. So I don't know if Noam's still watching, but if he's watching, that would be the question I have for Noam. But overall, so we'll hang out for a second, see if he's on. If anyone else in chat has any questions, okay, so Noam is responding, saying that he didn't see it as an outcome where he wins in that scenario. That's fair. I honestly don't remember completely the board state. I'm not known for having an exceptionally good memory, so I do remember at the time thinking that was an option. I don't know if it was your best option by any means. You definitely needed to find a way to actually get Amber in order to win, so that's fair. That might not have been your best case scenario. Yes, no, I agree. The Brobner board would have been irrelevant. You'd be doing it just to kill the witch. I don't know if that trade-off is worth it. That point is fair. I was just that was a thought that I had come into my mind at the time. So again, I mean, congratulations to both. Congratulations to LSY for winning. Congratulations to Noam for getting to the finals of this tournament. It was a very hard-fought tournament with exceptionally good players in the tournament. And it was just a very well played final. It was two very close games. Like I said, there were some little bitty nitpicking we were doing regarding some of the plays, but nothing dramatically terrible, I thought. And overall, a worthwhile, a worthy final is the word I'm looking for a very good tournament. I think we will probably be doing, for anyone else who's interested in adaptive matches, we will probably be doing the the third place matchup, not semifinal, between the two individuals who lost their semifinal matchups. If no one else has any questions or any comments in chat, I think that's probably going to do it for the cast this evening. But keep tuned. Make sure you follow this channel if you haven't already on Twitch. I'll posting my things up to YouTube. I started a YouTube channel recently, so all the videos will be up on Twitch and YouTube. So if you prefer either format, and throw me a follow so you'll know when I throw up new content. Noam is reminding me that the third place matchup, thank you Noam, is between Nathan and B-Hawk, who were who both lost their respective semifinal matchups to these two players that you saw play today. So we will be doing that third place matchup sometime soon. That will be up on Twitch, and I'll put it up on YouTube afterwards. So you'll be able to get some new content. I'll have strategy videos. I also have our Team SAS cast, which I'm a member of Team SAS LP. We have our first SAS cast that's up on Twitch and YouTube. So we'll be able to have those. That content will be available for you. So I think until next time, that's all I have for today. Signing off, saying everyone have a good day and keep forging. Thanks.